Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Are You Experienced, a new podcast all about the business of experiences. I'm Joe Timpson, the founder of Conveyor. We're a live experience analytics company, and I'm going to be interviewing key people across the experience economy to try and make sense of this vast and growing part of the entertainment industry that I find myself in. My guest today is the wonderful George Wood, founder and MD of Lunar Entertainment Group. And we talk about George's incredible journey from single outdoor cinema screen to working with massive entertainment IPs to bring them into real-world immersive environments. We discuss how those relationships work, how the risk profile is very different from IP owner to producer and how to navigate that, and how relationships are still the best predictor of future success. I really enjoyed this one, so I hope you do too. On with the show. George, welcome to the Are You Experienced podcast. Great to have you here.
To be here.
Excellent. So for those who don't know George, which seems like those people are few and far between actually in the experience
I'm not
industry.
sure if that's a good thing or not, Joe.
Certainly everybody I've met so far says, "Oh, you must speak to George." So you're very well known and regarded by the sounds of things.
Good to hear. I've got a big mouth, probably. I think that's what it is. And I'm old. I've been around a long time. That's what it is, really.
Well, yeah, that certainly helps, I'm sure. So you are the founder of Lunar Cinema and now Lunar Entertainment Group, and we will dive into that in a minute. First, a little bit of a stitch up by our mutual acquaintance, Chris. It would be remiss of me not to ask you to start at the very beginning and tell us about your starring role alongside Hollywood royalty Christopher Lloyd in the early noughties classic S Club's I Dream. What's that about?
Mean, how on earth? I can't believe Chris knows that, and I can't believe Chris then told you that. I mean, it's like my sordid past in kids' TV comes back to haunt me on a pretty regular basis. This was, look, the truth is, yes, my early career was as an actor, terrible actor. Thank God it didn't go much further than the one you've just referenced. But do you know what? It was an incredible experience. I lived in Barcelona and filmed a TV show where I found out as we were turning up to film this show, we were going to be living in Barcelona for 6 months, that it was with S Club. Mm-hmm. S Club 8, not S Club 7, so the youngsters. Yeah. But almost more interestingly, the lead actor the owner of the school, it was all set in a school, was Christopher Lloyd, my absolute hero, the Doc from Back to the Future. Yeah. And of course, the irony is we turned up and S Club didn't have a clue who he was. And I had to make them sit and watch. Back then it was DVDs. I made them watch the trilogy, part 1, part 2 and part 3 of Back to the Future during the gaps between takes, so that they would know who the hell this legend was. And I would spend lunchtime in the canteen, the crew canteen or whatever, saying to Christopher Lloyd, so tell me about Danny DeVito. What was that like? Literally just asking him about, his career in Taxi and obviously in Back to the Future, which I said to him is my favourite film ever. And the last day I got him to sign my box set DVD, which I've still got.
Fantastic. Well, there you go.
I can't believe you brought that up. But yes, that was the alternative career path.
Yeah. Well, that it seems like you peaked there with starring alongside your hero. So
well, exactly.
Exactly.
They say never meet your heroes, don't they? But actually, he was the loveliest bloke and a complete legend. So
good. Well, now that that's all clarified, what made you then make the transition? So you start out as acting. What made you make the leap to founding Lunar Cinema? Talk us through that kind of journey to bring up to today.
Do you know what actually happened was I was an actor. There was never any work in the summer. Or at least I remember it being that I would ring up my agent and say, when's the next audition? She'd say, stop ringing us in July and August expecting for there to be loads of castings. There's not. Call again in September. Don't worry. We'll always get you work, George. And so it was always one of those where I remember thinking for a while, I should have a small summer business, something that's going to see me through those months of the summer. And I'd been to Australia and seen outdoor cinema. That's what had happened. And it had launched in my memory as most brilliant experience. Sat with a load of mates in Sydney Harbour, it was, having a few beers and I remember saying as we were sat there, this is amazing. A big inflatable screen, few drinks. We're watching an 80s classic. why on earth doesn't anyone do this in England? And all my Aussie mates said, because your weather is, and then insert outrageous expletive, um, which I'm not sure if this is a kid-friendly podcast or not, but you can imagine what they said.
I
And
did actually, knowing what I'm like, I did tick. You have the option to tick in the hosting thing whether it's going to be explicit content or not. And
brilliant. What did you tick, Joe?
I ticked explicit because
Amazing. So does that mean I can swear?
you can swear if you so wish.
It's more offensive the Aussie accent I do it in when I said, why don't we do this in England? They said, because your weather's shit, mate. And I went, it's a fair point. Our weather is shit. But you know what? I've got a funny feeling it will work. We've got these amazing backdrops, castles, medieval forts, real palaces. Can you imagine watching an amazing film in those settings? And obviously, and then I started to think about, well, we do Glastonbury, we do open air theatre, we do all that. Why on earth shouldn't open air cinema work? So it stayed in my mind. And of course, one of those ideas that you do nothing about for a long time. And then I was doing a play in the West End. I was commuting in on a scooter, and it was, God knows what the year was, 2007 or 8, I think. And I was knocked off on the Elephant and Castle roundabout and broke my leg. It was honestly, when I tell this story, I sometimes think, did this actually happen? But it really did. I was in King's College Hospital in Camberwell, and the doctor said, mate, it's a really bad break. You're not going to be able to work for 6 months probably. And I remember in my hospital bed thinking, well, I'm going to do that open air cinema idea. I've been thinking of it. I've never done it. I can't act for 6 months now. This is the opportunity. So from my hospital bed, I rang up my local park, Dulwich Park. It was far too much morphine going around my system, clearly, because I rang them up and they said, open air cinema. No, we've never done that. We do open air theatre, but no, never open air cinema. Is that what you do then? And I left a second and steadied myself and said, yeah, that's what we do. And I'd been to one screening. It was complete blag, and we hired a screen that summer and we showed Some Like It Hot because it was the only film I could get the rights to.
Right.
And it fully sold out. And I remember being stood at the back under the stars in my local park, which is still my local park to this day. I remember thinking, this is amazing. The audience reaction is nothing like going to a cinema. The audience cheer at the end. They laughed as one. The audience behaved differently. The food and drink was great. Yeah, everything about this was what I hoped it could be. And I remember thinking, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to invest my meager life savings in a projector and an inflatable screen. And of course, it was just right place, right time. I look back on that now and think you wouldn't want to enter that market at any other time. We were the first people to import the inflatable screens. We just managed to get all the best venues. I got Hampton Court Palace, and that was the breakthrough. They then told Blenheim Palace and Leeds Castle and Kensington Palace. And before you know it, we had every great venue that you could imagine watching a film in. Don't get me wrong, it was a shed load of work, and I look back on it now and think, my God, I was young and had nothing to lose. But it was the most brilliant adventure, because we literally built a team, and some of that team is still with me now. And that was, God knows how many, 17 years ago now or something. But it was right place, right time. And the Luna Cinema became a brand. It became a brand that I felt really passionate about, where I would say to sponsors, they would get in touch saying, can we have headline sponsorship? And I'd say, you can, but it's the Luna Cinema Presents. And then in partnership with Hilton, whoever, we were working with Ben and Jerry's or whatever, Haagen-Dazs, we would always make sure that the Luna brand was recognizable, so that there would be a trust, that the audience knew it was going to be a quality experience. Even when it rained, it went ahead. Even, we built that trust so that when COVID struck, we had a loyal fan base and we could move to drive-in cinema. It was the only bloody thing that anyone could do. And the audience would go with us on that journey. And the times I'd get the film programming wrong, and I would think, okay, no one wanted to see that film, but, hopefully the audience went with us. And so as the business evolved, which it inevitably did, and COVID was the main determining factor of that. Cinema was changing anyway, to be honest. We were already moving in a different direction before COVID, and we'd already got the start of what is now an IP-based experience business. We were definitely moving in that direction, but it was all thanks to those early years of outdoor cinema. And Cinema Under the Stars is still something I'm so passionate about. And it is, for anyone that's not done it, it is nothing like going to the cinema. That's what I love about it.
So it sounds like COVID then actually was, I mean, this, for anyone who worked in live experiences, I'm not saying that it was a positive experience, but it sounded like it came at the right time in terms of you making this transition. Did it accelerate the transition to this new business model, or?
Do you know what? Looking back on it now, it was, let's be honest, it was a horrendous time for the industry. That was so clear. We weren't eligible for any of those, the government support that would have been meaningful fell between. We weren't a cinema and we weren't a theatrical experience, so we couldn't get the Arts Council funding. So thank goodness we could do drive-in cinema. And I look back now and think, and I was the idiot who was saying to our team on the weekly Zoom calls in those early weeks of COVID, we are the Lunar Cinema. We are the best at outdoor cinema. We don't do drive-in cinema because honestly, I don't think it's the right experience sat in a car watching a film. Is that going to work? So I was the idiot who was reticent, saying no. And then as you could see how serious this pandemic was going to be and that this was probably going to be a while and that ticket sales just stopped. No one obviously would buy tickets for anything. That actually, thank God we made that decision to move to drive-in cinema. It was, I have to say, looking back, it was speaking to all of our venues. We had such great relationships with the venues. And I would speak to Nebworth House and Warwick Castle and Blenheim Palace, and they would say, please do drive-in cinema. We've lost our entire events schedule for the summer. And I would think, well, actually, if anyone's going to make this work, it's us. We own the screens. We've got the relationship with all the film distributors. And just by chance, one day the phone rang, and it was during that weird spell where you could go for a walk once a day. You know, it was that, and I was on the call, and it was our sound partners, and they said, by the way, if you're going to do drive-in cinema, we've just developed this wireless box that sits on the dashboard and doesn't need to plug into your car. It's battery powered, and it will give amazing audio, far better than what others are going to be doing, which is tuning the FM radio and buying a frequency.
I see.
Which, of course, because it was always in my mind that if we are going to do this, how the hell are you going to do the sound? And the answer was you had to rent an FM frequency, which was never good because modern cars turn themselves off to save the batteries and people can't find 98.1. You know what I mean? All of that malarkey. So this was the solution, and immediately it gave us the edge. It gave us a point of difference. We had this incredible speaker system that was COVID compliant. Sanitize it, give it through the car window, then you handed it back on exit. And we opened 5 drive-in cinema sites in 5 days. And that was hours after Boris Johnson stood up and said, safari parks and drive-in cinemas, you can now open. And it was literally like, shit, mobilize quick. And we literally opened 5 in 5 nights and it was sold out. Adele came to the first one because if you're Adele, there's nothing else to do than go to the Lunar Drive-In Cinema. So even she turned up to the first one. So it was just, again, it was so fortunate that we had that. And it meant that we didn't need to lose our trusted staff that we'd spent ages growing this wonderful team. And they were busy and we were so busy. We did, God, I look back now, a couple of 100,000 cars that year. It was so popular. And I have to say I was wrong about the experience. Actually, it really worked. We had people on scooters, electric scooters, delivering food to your car. So it was all COVID compliant. You ordered through a QR code on the screen of that speaker box I was talking about. So it all worked. And actually the film experience was great. Felt like a novelty, felt like a throwback to Americana, you know, like Grease, the Danny Zuko drive-in scene. It kind of all worked. And the venues loved it because it was using the space. It was actually, you know, putting events on again. So thank God we did it. Looking back now, it wasn't, kind of being honest, it wasn't the precursor to what came after. The move for our business had actually already started.
Right.
By then we had Friends, and Friends was the key. The IP Friends, we'd built this relationship with Warner Brothers where we developed this Friends experience, and that was already so popular that my focus was, let's survive COVID with drive-in cinema, but as soon as we can get the Friends experience back out again, that's where my focus is, and that's kind of where I could feel the audience wanted to go. That's the interesting thing. You've got to, I know it's a cliche, but give the audience what they want. And this idea that they wanted to go into the world of Friends, of their favourite TV show, was so apparent that I was like, great, that we want to do more of this and still
Yeah.
show films in amazing settings. But wouldn't it be great to get other IPs and build the world, let the audience go into them?
Fascinating. I love that. So it's like that kind of COVID story is just such a great, you know, entrepreneurial resilience in action. It's kind of, it's it's a
It was
wonderful
needs
story.
must is the
Yeah.
truth. And the funny thing is, you do when your back's against the wall, you have to think on your feet, don't you? And
Yeah.
funnily enough, the COVID is littered. That period in everyone's life is littered with this type of story where people
Mm,
were really. I mean, look, it was a horrible time for everyone. I know that, but there were so many ingenious things that came out of it
mm,
where people did have to think quickly and pivot
mm.
their businesses and all of that. Yeah, and so we were so fortunate, and I have to say it was all down to that little dedicated team that saw the opportunity and went, "Fuck it, we're going to make this happen," and we did. And it was a real moment of, wow, we survived that. We only survived. It wasn't like we were printing money at all. It
Well,
was
look,
survived.
plenty of people did, plenty of businesses didn't, did they?
True,
So,
true.
so yeah, very, very good. So you mentioned there big IPs. That is the business that you're in now. You work a lot with these like Friends and these big kind of global IPs. Obviously, other Warner ones that you've worked on, like Batman, which is about as big as an IP as it gets. Where do those opportunities come from? Are you kind of approaching an IP owner with an idea? Are they coming to you with an RFP? Is it both? Help us kind of understand that process.
It's a good question, and the honest answer is it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
There are certain IPs that I think will be perfect for what we do, and so we'll initiate that conversation with the rights holder. But the truth is, I've now been doing it for a while, and hopefully there's a trust. And it is all about trust. These are such valuable assets, these IPs, that for Warner Brothers with Friends, the first thing they said to me was, "This is our sacred IP. It's been around for at the time 20 years. It's now 30 years." And we want it to be treasured and looked after so that fans in 30 years' time still love Friends. And so I feel such a sense of duty and responsibility because we are the custodians of that incredible TV brand. And I think that builds trust, that they can see we care. And so we become known as, okay, they'll do a good job and they will respect the IP and so on. So we have been really fortunate in recent years that we've now had opportunities come to us where we presented Jurassic World in London a few years ago, and I remember sitting with Universal after, and they said, "We're so impressed with how it's been presented." And I said, "Well, of course, it's great. It's a brilliant show. We didn't create the show. We just cast actors, and we really thought about how best to present this world of these dinosaurs." And they said, "Well, great. What else can we be doing together?" And I said, "What other IPs are you working on?" They said, "We've got this film called Wicked."
Mm,
I was like, "Oh, I know, love the musical. We'd love to do an experience around the film." And that was one where it came about purely because of doing a good job on Jurassic World. And that's
mm,
obviously how you always hope the industry works, that you do a good job and somebody recognizes it and says, "Let's do more together." And so Batman, the one you just referenced, was definitely a product of having the trust of the studio from years and years of the Friends experience. And they said, "Look, we've got this idea with Batman. There's an archive of assets of the props and costumes and the cars from all the movies." And I said to them on that call, "And you're going to tell me it's in California?" And they said, "No, it's in the UK. In fact, it's an hour north of London." It was like, "What? I'm on my way there now."
yeah.
And it was a treasure trove. It was every amazing asset that's ever been used in the Batman movies. And
Wow.
immediately I started saying, well, this is going to be the most incredible experience for fans to see this. And let's put it in a themed environment, not just in white walled exhibition halls with glass boxes. Let's build the Batcave and let's build the environment the fans are going to want to go into. So, yes, look, in answer to your question, Joe, it's a bit of both. And there are always IPs that I think, oh, wouldn't it be great to get that? But we've been so fortunate that we've now carved out this niche and we've become hopefully known for known as a company that takes these IPs and creates the type of experience that the rights holders are happy with and delighted that their IP is being used in this way. But most of all, it's that the fans of the IPs and the audience goer thinks that was exactly what I want from that IP. And it's
Mm,
something I talk about all the time, that no two experiences are the same. There's no formula that we follow saying, oh, it has to be this room followed by this room, photo op here, and immersive experience here, or interactive moment
Mm,
here. There is no science. There's no formula, because each IP is different,
mm,
and it comes down to what is it that the fans want from insert the name of the
yeah,
IP, and it is different every single time, and that's what makes it interesting, I think, and challenging.
absolutely. I think there's a couple of interesting things there. I think what you're saying about, you know, doing a good job, um, hopefully leads to more work. I think that's I mean, certainly how we think about as a new business in the experience economy. That's how the experience economy works, right? It's if you focus on delighting and creating an experience that knocks people's socks off, then they're going to come back, they're going to tell their friends, and so on and so forth. And
Totally.
the experience of working, even in a B2B setting, the experience of working with a business is ultimately what determines all those things as well. I mean, I remember being in a conversation with a client, a big FMCG brand, a few years ago. The sort of the open secret in the market research world is that the big FMCG companies are really who do 90% of all of the research that happens.
Yeah.
And so they work with everybody, and everybody has a Unilever or a P&G or whatever on their this kind of client board. And the from the horse's mouth, someone at Unilever was said, we were sort of saying, how can we how does it work? How you decide who you prioritize, who you work with? And they said it just comes down to who we like working with most. We've got a
Yeah.
list of people who can do different things, and we go through the list and we say, all of it, they can all do it, but we'd rather work with them because the other people are annoying or whatever.
It's we want to work with the people that we like working.
That's what it comes down to. If you have a good experience, you're going to do it again.
It's always the way, isn't it? Like, life's too short to work with people you don't like working with, and it's good to hear that all the way at the top, that's kind of the ethos. Because ultimately, we're all, everyone's trying to do a good job, but you want to work with people that you share that vision with.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, and
Yeah.
as you say, it's that kind of, you hope that it always works that way, that if you do a good job, you are going to get the rewards. And so, I hope that that's always been our kind of ethos. Because it does feel as if our industry is still in its infancy. It still feels sometimes like the Wild West, and you hope that it's starting to become more established, and people are thinking of the experience economy is now big business, and these big owners of the IPs that are such useful sources of inspiration for what we do, are now really starting to recognise that, and are really open to them being used in this way, and see it as an extension of the brand. That's the thing; it's what the public wants. So it really is, it's helped enormously. Right?
Yeah, brilliant. And so the other thing that I thought interesting that you spoke to there is that idea of suitability, right? So the right IP for the right experience, and the right IP for the right type of experience. And obviously, as the producer operator, as I understand it anyway, you're taking all the financial risk, really, right? So you're taking on an IP. So there is this kind of almost due diligence required, or you can't just kind of trust that, oh, it's Batman, so whatever we do is going to be popular. How do you kind of think about that process? And I suppose how does financing work? How do you raise the money to kind of put one of these shows together?
The answer is, it's always going to be, I should imagine, it definitely is my experiences, it's always a combination of your world, which is gather as much data as possible, understand exactly everything we can understand in terms of, you're quite right, everyone goes Batman, of course it was a no-brainer, and you go, actually, but who is the Batman audience, and how can we work out, is it people like me who grew up with the Michael Keaton film in the 80s, or is it, or actually, is it a younger demographic who have found this IP later in new iterations of it, or the Christopher Nolan movies from the early 2000s? What is it, and where is the audience, and how best to reach them? Because if we don't understand that, we can't really present the business case of, we think we can sell X and we think it will cost Y to produce the show. And ultimately, the way that we work, and I think the way that everyone in our industry has to now work, is you've got to be really smart, and we've got to build the shows knowing as much information as we can, but also acknowledging the fact that no one's got a crystal ball and you can't always predict the hits. And for whatever reason, some shows sell better than others, and no one could have predicted it. So ultimately, there is always that, what we call kind of the producer's instinct or the promoter's gut instinct. Then you get that kind of sense of, yeah, I kind of know who this audience is. I know what they'll pay. And hopefully you get it right more than you get it wrong. But my goodness, we spend so long building models, building the case, and nearly always, as you said, the financial case. How can we lean on all of the experience we have to create these shows in a really smart way, where we're giving enormous value for money, and yet with the commercial returns that the investors need. So it's always based on that. And we often will start off with the data collection piece, as anyone might think, and you go, right, let's find out what is the reach of this brand, where is it in terms of who's streaming it, who's clicked on it, who's likes the social page or whatever, and then we can extrapolate from that enough data to build the case. Raising finance is obviously always a challenging thing. We're part of a large corporate in Sony that Luna's now part of Sony Music, and so that's been a wonderful advantage for sure. In that we have a single financial backer, but it's still, everyone is, there's no easy wins. We still have to present every show that we do as, this is the case, and the case has to be robust, because it's a really risky industry, as you said, in that it's very different to so many other entertainment industries where all the risk is on us. The rights holder is nearly always just getting, it's getting a royalty and a guaranteed fee, but they don't take the risk. It's us taking the risk. So you've really got to know the market, and that is the most challenging thing, is having the information that you think you've got and knowing that it is robust. It's all data, actually, Joe. This is your world. It's all about data, ultimately.
Yeah. Good. Well, that's encouraging to hear, obviously, considering
Exactly.
where we sort of sit in this value chain. But yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. I think the other thing you say, that obviously the IP owner carries no sort of financial risk, but obviously there is. You mentioned it earlier on about feeling like a custodian of the IP or a custodian of the brand, and I guess that's where the IP owner, the rights holder's risk comes in, right? So they and it goes back to what you were saying before about, they want to work with people they trust because they have this brand or this fandom that they want to grow and remain authentic or extend. In a world where with friends, they're not making any more friends. They never will make any more friends. So that has to live in a world where that kind of main channel is kind of retired effectively, right? So, how much do you think about that when you're kind of pitching ideas and thinking about creating these shows? You've said that you feel like a custodian, but how do you factor that into the pitch or the business case, if you like?
It's such a vital part of what we do, is basically drilling into what is it about the IP that we think either makes it right for an experience, or that we think the audience are going to appreciate an experience. And you're right, it is, with friends, because it is often my go-to because it was the first one we did and it's the one we know so well, but it was based on the understanding that there's a depth of affection. These are characters that the audience are so comfortable with, because if you were to add up the number of hours that a Friends fan has spent watching Friends, it's an astronomical number. That's a bit of data that I don't have to hand, but you could maybe help with some. It's it is,
I think it's still the most watched thing on Netflix.
That's it. And it's incredible that this show keeps finding new audiences, and people love it because it's their safety, their comfort blanket. When you've had a crap day at work, you put Friends on. These characters are so well known by the audience that it felt as if it was of course it's going to work. Of course you're going to build the world of your favorite TV show and people are going to want to go into it. In reality, that was 10 years ago. That was the right place, right time. And we've managed to, it's been incredible that show keeps finding new audiences. So many great shows do not make great experiences. And it's not through any fault of the creators. It's just that they don't lend themselves. And I do think that so often you've got to ask yourself, and I often talk about it internally with our team is, what is the public's appreciation of it? What is it they like about the show? And is it a transient affection or is it a deep-rooted, inherent affection like Friends has? Because the two things are different. And if we're talking commercially, how we actually commercialize these experiences, are people going to buy a ticket or do they just quite like it when it's on TV? That's a totally different proposition. And then we then really drill into, and if we do think there's a depth of affection, what is it the audience want to do with it? Interesting case in point was Formula One, where we presented the Formula One exhibition recently in London, and it was so obvious that IP, that world of F1 was in such rude health that the Netflix show Drive to Survive had brought in a whole new audience. The sport had entered a new phase in its post, Bernie Ecclestone life, and the sport was just in such a great place that it felt like, of course, this is right. And every bit of research we did made us think this is going to work. And London is a great market for this exhibition, and it proved to be the case. The audience was so much broader than you might have had 10 years, 5 years, even 3 years earlier for that show. And it was so clear that when you talk about what is it that the brand is putting on the line, and the answer is their entire IP, it is a big swing for the brands. And as you say, we are the custodians of it, but it felt as if we were pushing on an open door with F1. It had maneuvered, the IP had maneuvered itself into such a position where it was such an obvious one to then say, great, we're going to take this to market. And that's what we're hoping for, obviously, to find ones like that where you go, of course, the audience it's an extension of their affection, their existing affection for the IP, and it's a physical home for it. So often in the modern day, these are digital engagements where we're either watching through our phones or our TV screens, now go into the physical world. And that's obviously what we've done with Squid Game recently in London, where it's bringing to life something that is otherwise it's out of everyone's. You sit in your living room and you watch these shows, but they feel quite exotic and different. That was it's set in South Korea. It feels nothing like London, yet you go, if the physical world is in London, you can go into it. My God, that's an exciting proposition.
And I think what's so interesting about that, and maybe this is some, like, a sort of principle that you can apply to what makes a good in-person experience. With Squid Game, when you're watching that, you're just so, it's almost like you're desperate to feel what it's like to be in there. You're sort of picturing yourself in those situations at every moment, and those choices that you have to make and all that kind of thing. Yeah, it's just a sort of no-brainer for an experience.
And that is it. The thought process is always, what would I do if I was in that position? Would I be able to do? And that you're constantly asking yourself that as you're watching that show. And the fact that it's slightly it makes people anxious and tense, and it's heightened, that kind of level of heightened appreciation that Squid Game elicits. I think it's a bit like when people they like the fear of horror movies, and they like the spiciness of a really spicy character. It's kind of addictive, and it probably releases certain endorphins, and you kind of I felt when we took on Squid and we were working with Netflix on what that show is that's now in London, it was, if we can tap into that, people are addicted to the tension of Squid Game, I think. And that constant question you ask of what would I do? Well, now you can find out. Come to the experience.
There is so obviously, our business is rooted in the sort of the neuroscience and the science of memorable experiences, basically. And there is a kind of a key pillar of our sort of scientific underpinning, which is around exactly that. It's this resolving of tension, resolving of kind of fear and things like that, is what drives incredibly memorable but positive memory about a particular experience. So it's less about the feeling of being scared and more about the resolution of that kind of, coming through the other side, that creates this really positive reflection.
But you only get that positive reflection if you've had the the trough, if you've had the low or the
Yeah.
tension,
Well,
the
it's a
the
bit,
anxiety.
it's a peak in emotion, but it's tension or fear or something like that, but then resolves into this kind of that's what attributes a positive memory to that kind of that period, which otherwise would just be a memory of being terrified.
Exactly, which doesn't sound much fun.
Yeah, I'm probably butchering the science on that,
No,
but
look, it
yeah.
makes a lot of sense. It's the same with any great storytelling, isn't it? You've got to have the peril. You've got to have
Mm.
the, otherwise you don't get the resolve, as you say.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
the same with
yeah.
everything.
Interesting stuff. So, I mean, you founded Luna in 2008, which makes you about as tenured as anyone, I think, in this immersive entertainment world. Albeit, it didn't start out that way, but like you say, it feels like day zero almost with a lot of this stuff, the speed that things are moving. So, thinking back to then versus now, do you feel like guest expectations have changed and are changing? What was it like back then versus now, and kind of what's that direction of travel?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is without doubt the audience's expectations have changed in the years that I've been doing this, and rightly so. Look, the audience now demands um, an incredibly high level of production value and the quality of the experience. It doesn't mean that you have to spend a fortune on these shows, but they have to be of a certain level. People are really, I think, protective and conscious of their leisure time, and that maybe was, I know it's a cliche, but it's been talked about as since COVID. People, when people are going out, they really want to go out. They really do value their personal time and their leisure time, and so they are willing to spend on great experiences and in-person experiences. That's the key, I think. The common thread in everything we do is that it's things you can't do at home on your sofa, and it's always better as a shared experience with friends or partners or whatever. It's always better with more than one person in all of these experiences, because you get that collaborative feel, and the atmosphere, the social thing is so important. But my goodness, the audience expectations have changed in the last 10 years. And I do think that's partly because we in London and the UK in particular are so fortunate that we are now this is the epicenter of immersive experiences. It really wasn't before. We used to always look to America, and I go and see a lot of shows in America, and I do think that the UK is now the epicenter, and London is the hotbed for this type of thing, and it's meant that we are exposed to so many great experiences, and it has raised the bar, it's raised the level of expectation, and I think that my competitors, a lot of them are friends, and we talk a lot, are conscious of it, that the audience expectations are now of a level where they maybe weren't before. And that's partly also because the theme parks have raised their game, and they now are immersive experiences, if you like. And theatre has definitely, traditional theatre, proscenium arch theatre has definitely evolved into an immersive experience where you enter the stage door, or the lead actress goes out onto the balcony and sings. It's kind of breaking the conventions of you sit in a seat and we'll entertain you. And that's what I'm so fascinated by, that everyone's kind of moving towards how do we let the audience feel more in the world and experience it. So it's not so much that you've got to spend more money always, and often you do, and costs have gone up, but it's much more about the quality of the experience and the consideration of what is the audience experience going to be, because the audience really do expect an incredible evening out for their ticket money.
Yeah, it's really interesting. That's a really good example, actually, of the Evita thing. Although you have all these ticket holders who were kind of really annoyed because they're watching the main song of the whole show on a screen in the theatre, whilst Joe
And
Public are
the
outside.
punters who've not bought a ticket
Yeah.
got the best view.
Yeah, exactly. And they've only turned up for that song, so
I know.
yeah, no,
I know, but they think
it's a
you don't need
difficult
to
one.
actually bloody buy the ticket.
Yeah.
But it is an example. You're quite right. It is an example of someone, in that case, Jamie Lloyd, saying, "Well, look, what else can we do with this? It's not just sit in the seat and watch."
I think you've hit it on the head. It's not it's moved from an audience just being move from an audience just being
Passive.
someone who you're presenting to, exactly, passive, and you're kind of using the space around the audience and thinking about the space that they occupy as that being the center of that space rather than observing a space that the action's taking place in. I think
Totally.
that's really interesting.
And ultimately, it is well, in your world, it's about, how do you elicit those that chemical reaction? Those, how do you get goosebumps from the audience, and what is it that you can do? And there are certain things you can do, and to help create that. And that world building is definitely part of it, where you feel as if you've escaped your normal life basically for a couple of hours. That ultimately is where you win big, I think, where it can feel like true escapism, where you're in the world of Squid Game, you're in the world of Friends, whatever it is. You are not in your day to day anymore for those couple of hours.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so the last couple of things I'm going to ask, these are sort of consistent questions that I'm going to be asking to everyone. What my hope, first of all, is that this becomes a bit of, although it's, as I've already said, it's going to be a sweary one, so I hope you're not too young, but young people who are looking to kind of break into this industry or are just getting started in this industry, what advice would you give to somebody just starting out or trying to break into the world of experiences?
It's a good question, and the answer is, what I would say to somebody who's thinking, do I want to get into this? And is it experiences that really floats my boat? I would say, see everything. The most important thing you can do if you're not in this world, but you think that you might want to be, is see everything, because it's only by seeing things, the good and the bad, that you really understand why something works and why it doesn't. And even the most experienced practitioners sit in meetings, and if they're really honest with themselves, say, look, we don't know until we put the audience into this experience whether that's going to work and whether that flow is going to work. And you think and often we have a hunch, and we've been doing it for long enough. But the truth is, it's only when you see an audience in real time in an experience that you go, my God, that works. And sometimes it's the most simple devices, the simplest things, that are getting that goosebumps, that experience that we're all striving for. And so I do think the best advice is see everything and have opinions then on everything. Why did you like that? Why didn't you like that? And then don't be afraid to bang on doors. I know I'm old fashioned, but I respond to somebody who shows enormous willing to actually say to me, I really want to learn from what you're doing. Can I come and, be part of it? And so often we've found great people by saying, well, look, why don't you start on this show as a steward, as a staff member, see the show, then work your way up and become a duty manager, then become part of our team, and then become, it is the best way in, because then you really understand what these shows are and what it is that works about.
Yeah, I've recorded one of these already, and very
Spurs,
similar
John.
advice. No, I'm afraid not. I'm afraid not.
What?
You were picked to the
Damn.
post. It's a very similar sentiment, and I was saying what I love about the experience economy and live events and experiences more broadly is that, and what I like as an opportunity as someone building a business, is that there's all this doom and gloom about entry level roles and kind of with the rise of AI and in lots of industries, they're just disappearing, right? These kind of ability to start your career with meaningful work that that in lots of sectors are dwindling, right? Whereas I think live it's always been a great industry for young people to be in, but now it just represents such a kind of obvious path, like you say, that it's really hard to see getting too disrupted by the kind of craziness that AI is bringing to a lot of other industries. I'm excited about the opportunity to hire young people to do, we obviously do a lot of field work where, that's the kind of thing that you can kind of, as an entry level role, then kind of go up and work your way through. So I think it's really good advice, and it's really exciting if you're a young person to consider this as an industry.
And as you say, there are so many industries that you now think, well, I can't imagine that's not going to be replaced by AI in the future. Whereas this really isn't, because at least my belief is that we're all going to place more and more value on human crafted, the actual, handcrafted, honed human touch of a live experience. You can't replace that, a person greeting you and, welcoming you, or creating the atmosphere. It's going to be, it's human heavy. That means it's costly, but I think the audience response is that much better. I've just thought of a much better answer. Isn't that typical? That the other thing I would say to a young person is, and probably the most important thing is, don't be afraid to fail. It's like, if you haven't failed doing what we're doing, then you haven't done it. You've not actually, you've got to fail to understand what works. You can only be good at this if you've got it wrong, because then, and you learn. And it is such a cliche, I know, but I genuinely refer to the misses more than the hits. You learn so much more. And we've all had failures, and it's important that you do, and that we acknowledge them and say, okay, we learned from that. What is it we learned, and what are we going to not do again?
100%, 100%.
You've got to fail.
Yeah.
Hopefully you win more than you lose. That's always how I
as long as you're up overall,
exactly.
Then you're fine. So final question, who else should I be speaking to? Obviously, this is the premise of all this, is that this is my kind of journey through the experience economy, trying to speak to the key people that make it all go round. So who do you think I should be speaking to, and what should I ask them?
Wow, that's a really good question. There's so many brilliant people in our industry. If it's, are we talking specifically in experiences that we want to look at?
Well, wherever. I mean, it could be in immersive experiences. It could be anywhere across the full spectrum of the experience economy.
Well, you know what? We get together as an industry every now and again. And recently, 2 weeks ago, we all got together in Madrid, and it was everyone who you kind of work with in a room, and it's a really interesting conversation. And everyone's got opinions, and everyone's got, it's a lot of big characters. But my goodness, there is a healthy amount of respect of people trying to do something great here and trying to give people brilliant experiences. There's a lot of people I respect, and people who are doing interesting things, whether it's on our side, as in producing and promoting. And I go to shows. I mean, when we talk about Friends being, this incredible 10 years outlier, the Crystal Maze in London has been running for that length of time, and the producer of that is a friend of mine, Tom, and he does a brilliant job. And the way that he's created that show, that experience of the Crystal Maze, I think it was really meaningful in our industry, and kind of gave so many people okay, that's how you do it. That's how you translate this to an experience. So he's someone interesting. I'll hook you up with him.
Right.
But Fever, my God, you look at Fever and you think, what they've done to ticketing and marketing is interesting. Always got interesting insights. There's so many, and obviously, look, in London at the moment, Immerse London. This idea that there's in the Excel, there was this vision that they would understand that the greater than the sum of its parts, build a destination, and there's multiple shows running in the same area. And the guy behind that just had the vision. His name's Damien, and his vision was that we will all benefit from having a one location where the audience are used to going, and they understand that that's where you'll go for premium experiences. And so always interesting insights from people who've got a bit of vision. So yeah, it's a really exciting time for our industry, and it's full of interesting characters, and 100%. You won't run out of people to talk to.
No, I know. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think I've been blown away. It's obviously the whole reason I'm doing this is because it's very new part of the entertainment industry, media entertainment industry. For me, that's my background has all been in media, sports, and entertainment. But on the research side, this is a whole new world for me. But so far, it's been incredibly welcoming. Part of the industry, the spirit of partnership, well, from you and from other people I've met, has been really, really, really exciting. So yeah, I'm very excited to talk to more key people and learn what I can. But
good.
Thank you, George, for doing this. And
not at all. Great to have a chat. Good to chew the fat.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thank you very much.
Good to see you.